It's been a couple of years since Taylor Swift's publicized battle with Scooter Braun and Big Machine Records for ownership over her masters. The battle ended with Taylor Swift declaring that she would re-record all of the albums she released prior to Lover, all the albums that had been sold off to Scooter Braun and other makers in the industry, so that she could own rights to her masters and her music for the rest of her life. Now, I, like many of you who are probably watching this video, have listened to Taylor's version a good amount since it dropped, and to no one's surprise, it's really good. The re-recording is just as good, if not better, than the original, and Swift really went for a one-to-one recreation of an already classic record. And I don't really have much to say about the differences between the 2008 and 2021 versions. I mean, these re-recordings feel more or less identical to the original record, even if they have some differences here and there, and I really just think it's a silly point to be trying to scrutinize between waveform and things like that, or at least it's just not the scope of the video. Taylor's version may sound extremely similar, if not identical, to the original version of Fearless, but what it does show us is a top-tier songwriter in top form early in her career, and affirms the legacy that Swift has been developing since the beginning of her career and has only really recently been able to cement with many more listeners. One definition of a top-tier songwriter is someone whose work can change different styles and still manage to maintain the same quality of songwriting. David Bowie and Bob Dylan are good examples of this, as they've had different phases in their career that have all been marked by high-quality songwriting, regardless of the kind of music they're putting out. Taylor's version came to us in a year where many of us have deeply re-evaluated Taylor Swift's legacy. Swift is taking full advantage of the momentum given to her by the Folklore and Evermore phase to breathe new life into songs that she wrote 13 years ago, and she is allowing the timeless qualities of those songs to speak for themselves here. I talked a lot about this in my video about Folklore. You can check the link somewhere. I don't know, just find it. But Taylor Swift's career has always been more than what her country phase or pop phase or folk phase has had to offer. And going back to Fearless is a great way to show off just where she started and just how strong she was with a sound that now feels so distant from what Taylor Swift is now known for. We are past the point of scrutinizing which version of Taylor Swift is better or worse, and have we just come to accept her as one of the songwriting elite, someone who's able to oscillate through different styles and whose career has reflected her consistency making those different styles of music. It's not that she sold out to become a pop artist, that was just part of her trajectory. And looking back on Fearless, it's really easy to tell why she was already at that level to begin with. Taylor's version is basically Taylor Swift spoon-feeding us an opportunity to evaluate and celebrate her legacy, and more specifically the legacy of Fearless, a top-notch country pop record that proved her ability to dominate at the top 40 sphere and was really the peak of the country phase of her career. Now, Taylor's version is a rehash of songs that were seen as the pinnacle of teen pop and nothing more, but we have now understood them to be the first peak of one of the great songwriters of our time. Now, hindsight is 2020, and Taylor's version is as much of an opportunity to reevaluate an old thing as much as it is just a new thing altogether. If you take a look at Metacritic, Taylor's version scored 11 Metacritic points ahead of her 2008 version, based off a similar number of reviews. Now, like I said earlier, tons of takes to be had about the different production, the vocal leaps that Taylor's version takes, or just, the whole scale of the re-recording. But this 10-point jump in reception feels a bit like making up for the past, if not fully reveling in the Taylor Swift legacy as it stands in 2021. When Fearless originally dropped in 2008, Taylor Swift's future as one of the music elite wasn't fully understood yet. Music editors rolled their eyes at the idea that a teen pop star like Taylor Swift could one day dominate the world. Now that we know the kind of star that Taylor Swift is, both critically and commercially, the reception of Taylor's version compared to 2008 is just really a funny exercise in how far we've come into terms with Taylor Swift's legacy altogether. I mean, in 2008, you had publications like NPR, E, and The Guardian asking questions about whether Taylor Swift could sing, whether her songwriting was worthwhile or just very formulaic, and if her music really had any depth beyond, being a teen diary in essence. And 13 years later with Taylor's version, NPR is throwing tons of bandwidth into exploring Fearless and Taylor's version in all forums. And The Guardian is calling Fearless a brilliant fixing of the understandable teenage impulse to mythologize the recent past. One point worth recognizing is that a lot of people who've grown up loving Taylor Swift are now dominating the discourse at a lot of major publications, a discourse that wasn't super prominent 13 years ago. But ultimately though, I think this leap in reception to Taylor's version can be chalked up to an evolving respect and prestige around Taylor Swift's name that just wasn't around in 2008. You know, all these creative and nostalgic analyses aside, Taylor Swift's version of Fearless also turns a series of business challenges that she faced into a parallel phase of her career that can stand alongside her already dominant Folklore and Evermore phase. If Taylor had it her way, I don't think she'd want to re-record Fearless in the first place. She'd rather have ownership of her masters, and she'd rather not have to go on this endeavor to re-record 6 of those records. Swift managed to use her fan loyalty to turn this into a bonus album cycle, her 3rd cycle in 2 years. After a decade of just carefully spacing out release to release, she's just straight up doing cycles again. Taylor's version is the 2nd time she's had to promote Fearless, and she's just repeating it in the name of this, creative and artistic justice, for better, for worse. Jeremy Larson summed up the challenge with this creative justice pretty well in this tweet. It comes off as a bit cynical, but I think it holds up when he says that Swift recorded exact replicas of her old songs to make it easier for her fans to replace the ethically bankrupt subtext of Swift not owning her own masters with a new, morally virtuous subtext. Ben Cesario at the New York Times called the subtext what it was. He said that she turned an act of business retribution into a joyful and participatory experience for her fans. Swift is one of the best-selling artists of all time, and she's as entitled as anyone to reap the rewards of her own creative work. But even if re-recording Fearless was in some way a personal project, those personal pretenses fade away when you consider just the monumental, money-making framing of the whole release. Swift used her re-recording of Fearless as an entirely new album cycle, an album cycle that she's able to promote with merch, potentially a tour when she's able to do that, and is being able to turn this into a money-making endeavor that is really, in fact, as Cesario said, business retribution for an act that affects really just a handful of really rich people. Of course, this re-recording probably wouldn't have been able to have flown under the radar either, so it makes plenty of sense that Swift wants to own that and create a record of fan service for her fans, and to be able to turn this into an event bigger than just re-recording the songs, but as a celebration of Taylor Swift and a celebration of Fearless. The situation that Taylor found herself in is uniquely Taylor Swift. She wants ownership of her music, so she will do whatever she can to become the owner. Of course, that's a very cool aspiration for everyone at all levels of the industry, but this is very specifically one of the biggest pop stars in the world, wanting ownership over her music that has been doled out in a way that's just not representative of what most musicians are going through. It's cool that Swift is speaking up and fighting back against this terrible thing that happened to her because of the music industry and the industrial complex around it. But there is a weird emptiness that comes with trying to go out on a limb for something that feels like some piece of business retribution, that feels like we're just fighting back against 2 people who are way bigger than we are and are way bigger than anything that might affect you and I. Of course, there's always an importance for looking up and being a fan and following things that are above us and are below us in terms of the experiences we have. But there is a certain emptiness that comes with trying to stick it to Scooter Braun and Big Machine Records in the name of defending Taylor Swift, the artist. I love her. I will continue to love her. I love her music forever. But it's just a weird feeling to have to go out on a limb for this thing. And all that being said, I'm glad that we got a great re-recording out of it. I'm glad that we got the deluxe edition, because that in and of itself makes the whole thing at least a little bit more worth it. If you have made it this far into the video, I don't know what that means. Did it mean I did something well? Does it mean you support me? Did you accidentally fall asleep and now you're hearing me speak while I close this video out? I don't really care, because if you made it this far, that means that I want you to share it. I don't know what it'll do for you, but it'll help the channel, which in turn could help your karma. Beats me. It'll be nice. Please share this out with your community, let people know, and let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think I was a little too harsh on the whole business piece of Taylor's version? Do you think the fan service is enough? Or do you really think that this should be seen as a marker for her career and nothing more, and that this is a monumental moment in the Taylor Swift canon? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to share this out with the people, and subscribe to No Vacuum, because I've got more videos coming in the pipe I don't know what they'll be about, but I want you there to watch them. So thank you so much, and I hope to talk to y'all soon.